Okay, I think we should get started. Presenters, are you ready? Are we good to go?
Yep.
All righty. Hello and welcome everybody as I start sharing my screen to the second. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Welcome everybody to the second and last pre-conference webinar for this New Directions LATAM that's going to be held in Brazil in May. We have a fantastic lineup of presenters. I'm really happy and privileged to have with us Carolyn Westbrook, Frank Giraldo and Vanessa Borges de Almeida with us. Three great presentations that take us into the realms of teacher education and classroom practice. So we've got great presentations coming. Before that, a little bit of housekeeping. As always, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat. Chat with each other about each other's questions. We will be taking questions and leaving plenty of time for them at the end of the webinar. And I've made the assumption that everybody knows me by now, but for those people who don't and are new to New Directions, my name is Mina Vittel, and I am the conference chair for New Directions LATAM. I'm very happy to be the host for today's webinar. Another piece of housekeeping. Funny, I can't move forward now. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, but I couldn't move forward there either, so that was not good. Let me try again. No. There we go. We have a flash sale for everybody attending this webinar and all of your friends. If you register tonight from any time now until midnight Brazil time, you can get 70% off registration fees. There is a code there at the bottom of that. I will show this slide again, and that's a great deal. But then if you can't register tonight for any reason, if you register tomorrow or Friday until midnight, again, Brazil time, you can receive a 50% discount. You can share these codes with all of your friends and colleagues if you want, but you get first pick because you are attending this webinar. So please take advantage of this. It's a great deal. And we hope to see you in Brazil. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing and I am going to introduce our first presenter, who is Carolyn Westbrook, a colleague of mine. Wonderful to have her here. And Carolyn is going to talk about linking learning, teaching and assessment and feedback in the classroom. So without further ado, over to you, Carolyn. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mina. Okay, I'll just go ahead and share my screen here, hopefully.
Yes, do.
Okay.
Yep, we can see that.
See me then?
Yeah,
okay.
That's great.
Just as a matter of interest, can you see the Teams part with you in there or not? Or can you just see my screen?
No, we can see us and your screen.
Right, okay. Well, I'll just try to move you up there then. Okay, thanks very much, Mina, for the invite, and thank you everybody for coming today. It's very exciting to be here to talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to meeting some of you in Brazil later this year. So now I've got the same problem that I can't move forward either, so I'm going to try and stop sharing again and reshare. We've all had this problem today that we haven't been able to move forwards and backwards.
Vanessa, you're not on your own.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to try and move that out of the way some. So today I'm just going to touch upon Barry O'Sullivan's comprehensive learning system and then look at some quotes, if you like, regarding why assessment is important. And then I'll talk about bringing assessment to the forefront, which will become clear as we go through, and the role of feedback should hopefully come into that as well. And that will, I'm not going to go into too much detail because these are the things that we're going to be talking about in the pre-conference webinar that I'll be running at New Directions in Latin America. And I don't have that much time, so just a few pointers regarding these areas. So for anyone that was at the last webinar 2 weeks ago, Professor Barry O'Sullivan talked about his comprehensive learning system, whereby curriculum, delivery and assessment are all inextricably linked. Now, for me, when I look at this, I can either read it from the top and then left to right, or from the top and then right to left, depending on whether I want to go clockwise, in which case it would be curriculum, delivery, then assessment, or whether I do it in the sort of Western left to right reading style of curriculum, assessment and delivery. But either way, for me, when I look at this, I feel that curriculum is the most important thing because that's at the top. So I'm going to change things up a little bit and switch it around a little bit so that assessment is at the top and we have curriculum and delivery at the bottom. Now, that's not to make them inferior, but it's more to do with the fact that assessment is often seen as a sideline. And as O'Sullivan 2020 notes, learning was traditionally seen as being very much aligned with matters of teaching. So that's the curriculum and the delivery side. But assessment was seen as being typically left in the hands of experts. So essentially, the different aspects of the education system that we see here in the CLS were seen as being quite independent of each other. And I don't want that to be the case anymore. I want us to see assessment as inextricably linked with curriculum and delivery. So why is assessment important? Basically, because of the amount of time that we spend on assessment. So teachers spend as much as 1/4 to 1/3 of their time on assessment, according to Stiggins 2007. And many of us do that without having the benefit of learning principles of sound assessment practices. So although Stiggins says it's 1/4 to 1/3 of our time, I would actually argue it's much more than that. And the reason I say that is because if you think about what happens in the classroom, whenever you ask a question, whenever you monitor your students to see how they're getting on, you're assessing how well they're doing. So I would say it's actually much more than 1/4 to 1/3 of the time, probably at least double that, I would say. You can choose to disagree with me, and that's fine. But just from my own practice, I know whenever I'm asking something, I might be checking comprehension, or I might be just making sure that the students are following what I've said and are able to process answers, maybe formulate answers. So I'm always assessing them, not necessarily in a formal way, but always with some sort of hindsight. So then again, why is assessment important? So this is David Bowd, and this is an old quote, but it's one. So I started teaching in 1992, which is a long time ago. And when I came across this quotation from 1995, it became a sort of guiding principle for me, because David Bowd argues that the results of when the results of assessment contribute towards students' qualifications, assessing their work is the most important thing we do for them. And so from even my early days as a teacher, this has always been the thing that sort of guides me, my work, and how I think about assessment. And then a little bit later, Race, Brown and Smith in 2004 said that, so building on what David Bowd said that nothing that we do to or for our students is more important than our assessment of their work and the feedback that we give them on it. The results of our assessment influence students for the rest of their lives and careers. Fine if we get it right, but unthinkable when we get it wrong. So that's, again, been a sort of important factor for me. It's great if when we give assessments, it all works fine and our results are reliable and the assessment is valid, that's all great. But when I'm making decisions that will affect my students' lives based on my assessments, I want to be sure that I've got it right, because if I'm making the wrong decisions, that's quite frightening, quite honestly. So let's come back to why we're here and our slightly amended CLS, so Comprehensive Learning System, and ask why we're doing this. Why do we teach our students? Why do we assess our students? And the reason is because we have goals. We have learning outcomes that our students are expected to achieve. So that's why I put learning outcomes in the middle there. So if we bring everything together, what we see here is that I've put learning outcomes at the top, because again, for me, the top is where I start. Others may start in different places, but I start at the top, and I'm going to work round clockwise because I work in a clockwise direction. So when I'm planning a course, I want to think about what are my learning outcomes? What do students need to be able to do by the end of the course? Once I've got those, then I don't start thinking about the teaching. I think, first of all, about the assessment. How do I assess my students in order to be able to measure whether they've reached those learning outcomes? Once I've got the ideas for the assessment, then I can think about, okay, what skills, what knowledge, what systems do I need to teach to the students in order for them to be able to complete the assessment? And that's not just teaching to the test, but it's teaching everything that could possibly be related to the skills, systems, language, topics, and everything that I'm going to assess them on. So then I think about my curriculum in there. Then I think about how I'm going to deliver that curriculum. What is it that's going to happen in the classroom? How is it going to be delivered? What materials am I going to use? What interaction patterns am I going to use? And so on. And then once I've designed my curriculum, I've thought about the delivery. Obviously, I deliver the curriculum, and then I come to assessing my students. So I come back to assessment up here on the top left. And then when I've delivered the assessment, I ask myself, have my students reached the learning outcomes? Hopefully, yes, but possibly not. So when we move on, again, when we've done our assessment, the results of the assessment don't just go towards asking myself, have they reached the learning outcomes? But what is key is that the results of the assessment feed into feedback. And feedback obviously goes to the students to tell them how well they've done and what they need to improve on. But also, crucially, it feeds back into the curriculum and into delivery so that I can improve my teaching and I can pick up on, especially in a formative assessment environment, I can pick up on what their weaknesses were and what they need to improve on to go forward. So that informs my curriculum and delivery going forward. But also, crucially, if we think back to Race, Brown and Smith, it needs to feed back into the assessment. So I need to use the results of the assessment as feedback, not only for the students, for their learning, not only for me, for my teaching and delivery, but crucially also to decide, did the assessment work? So it feeds straight back into the assessment again. So I need to ask myself, did I do the best job I could? Was the assessment fit for purpose? Was it valued? Was it reliable? Did the questions that I ask work in the way that I expected them to? So hopefully with this visual here, you can see that learning, assessment, teaching, and feedback are all inextricably linked. And in my pre-conference workshop, we're going to be looking at some formative assessment tasks and summative assessment tasks, and we're going to look at the types of feedback that can have a positive influence on my students. So that's everything I'm going to say just now, because I know I'm going to be pretty much out of time. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Mina. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Carolyn. Actually, you were spot on time-wise, so thank you. That's great. Well done. So that was Carolyn talking about turning the comprehensive learning system on its head, which I love the concept, and the critical importance of feedback. Just a reminder to our participants, if you have any questions, please just pop them in the chat. Thanks again, Carolyn, very much.
Thank you, Mina.
Our next lovely presenter is Frank Giraldo, who is based in Colombia. Frank, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mina, and thank you everybody for being here. I just want to start by thanking Mina for inviting me to present today and share some of my insights into language assessment literacy and teachers' professional development. So let's see if I can do a good job sharing my screen. I think you should be able to see it now.
Yes,
Correct?
we can.
Okay,
Yes.
so welcome to this short talk. This is around the idea of designing and teaching an assessment course for language teachers. I wanted to go for the ever elusive, catchy title for the presentation, which that's why it looks like a little prescriptive, some do's and don'ts, do this, don't do this. But in reality, this is more about shoulds and shouldn't. So recommendations that I have, I would like to share with you that I have gathered from my experience teaching assessment courses for undergraduate students, pre-service teachers and in-service teachers, face-to-face and also online. So the one of the current trends in language assessment literacy, and this is something that Fulcher kind of introduced or invited us to discuss and problematize, is that pedagogies for language assessment literacy. How is it that we can teach language assessment literacy, or how can we foster teachers' language assessment literacy? And I like this quote, literacy through action. And his article, he proposes that we work on a task-based pedagogy for language assessment literacy. So what that implies. So this is a current discussion, and this is something that I mean, I want to start with an invitation. So those of you who teach assessment courses, I am more than eager to hear your stories about you teaching assessment courses. What works well for you, what doesn't work so well for you, so that we can benefit from these ideas. My talk is based on the experience I have gathered from teaching language assessment courses in Colombia, in my country, and more recently, a language assessment course that I implemented online. I designed this with Dr. Shun Yan from the University of Illinois in the States, and teachers from Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil participated in this experience. This is something that happened last year. It was conducted entirely online. So my insights today come from teaching these courses for these teachers. The online course that I designed and taught last semester was fully sponsored by a scholarship given to me by Fulbright Columbia. So, you know, I need to give credit where credit is due because this was fully sponsored by them. So here we go with the shoots, some recommendations on what to do. You know, take them and analyze them based on your context of LAL. So when you're at the planning stage, when you're collecting data, I think it would be a good idea to use at least 2 data collection methods. Now, this makes sense in the general perspective of research. When it comes to collecting teachers describing or drawing teachers' language assessment literacy, it's a good thing to mix methods. So if you want to go for an interview, this is something that will give you information. If you want to go for a questionnaire, close-ended items that will give you more information, of course. And more recently, I have come to realize that if you analyze teachers' assessment instruments, this is going to give you more interesting information to find out what they do well and probably some areas that they need to improve. So we're looking at assessment literacy as development, and through a source, I mean, the more data collection methods you use, the better, but at least 2, because you can have feedback from a closed-ended questionnaire or an interview. And if you want to go for documents, and by that I mean assessment instruments, that's also going to tell you a little bit about how teachers put their technical skills into use and whatever needs to be improved in that area. So this is for planning the course. As you're teaching the course, and I recommend that this is done from day one, from the very start of the course, that teachers do a lot of hands-on work. So this kind of aligns with Fulcher's idea of pedagogy literacy in action. So get them to do tasks in which they, 1, critique tests from a theoretical perspective, checking whether they are valid for a particular test use, to what extent they are authentic, etc., etc. And also the way the test itself is designed. We all know that you cannot judge a test's validity based on the way it looks, but you can look at the way it is designed. Or, and, not or, and another thing of the emphasis on hands-on work is to get the teachers to design tests from day one. So if in your diagnostic you found out that your teachers want to design rubrics, then from day one they should be designing rubrics. The course should have a socio-cultural focus for LAL development. This is something that teachers keep telling me a lot about. I want to have the opportunity to interact with other teachers so I can learn from them and they can learn from me what they do well, what their challenges are in their assessment contexts, how we can problematize assessment together. This was most salient in the experience I had teaching teachers from these countries in Latin America, because they wanted to learn from each other. And we had more similarities than we did have differences in Latin America, which was another interesting thing. So the findings from the courses I've taught and the studies that I have conducted is that in language assessment courses, teachers learn from each other. So that's a wonderful thing to have. Now, for the things that I recommend you shouldn't do, but again, you know, analyze these based on your own assessment and LAL contexts. So one thing is that even though data for your diagnostic stage, meaning when you're planning the course, when you're designing the LAL workshops or lessons or whatever, the data will be mostly useful. But in some cases, maybe there are things that won't come up in the data. For example, I have included in questionnaires and in interviews, targeting the principles side of language assessment literacy, meaning ethics and fairness. And this doesn't come up as something prominent or relevant for teachers. However, I really arbitrarily decided to include ethics and fairness in courses, and teachers really became aware of the opposite, unethical practices or unfair practices in assessment, and how they are threats to validity of assessment. So include topics that you strongly feel should be included in the course, if you have a good seasoned argument to do so. If you're going to teach concepts in the course, I think it's a good idea to put them in context. Like, you know, we all know that the concept of validity is huge and the ramifications of this concept are way too many. But if you look at, for example, an assessment instrument by analyzing its use in context, the format of the instrument, the skills that it is supposed to be collecting information about, then the concept of validity may make more sense for teachers if you present it by having teachers explore assessment, problematize assessment, especially in a given context, not in the abstract. And finally, again, take this with a grain of salt. Maybe you shouldn't go too fancy with technology, especially if teachers have to be jumping around. For example, in this last course, we used Google Meet for, let's say, for the main session, and then I had teachers go to Zoom for breakout rooms. So this jumping around is something that they don't like so much. They do get used to the technology, but if you have teachers going from technology to technology, maybe it can take time, first of all, because you would depend on some infrastructure, like teachers having a good connection to internet. So it's a little bit of, it's a tiny detail, but it actually can have a positive or negative impact on the pacing of your lesson or your workshop in the assessment course. During, on May the 27th, I will be presenting many more findings and many more details. This is the name of the paper that I will be presenting. This is something that was co-authored with Dr. Shun Yan, who you see on the slide, from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So I will be more than honored to share some more insights with you based on the course that we designed for teachers in Latin America. This is the reference I use in the slides, and I think you can have access to this presentation by scanning that QR code. I appreciate your time and attention, and you know, I'll wait for the space for questions, for Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Frank. That was great. I love the idea of teachers jumping around, but possibly not with technology. But thank you. I love the idea of shoulds and should nots based on your experience of the courses you ran. There are a couple of questions coming in, but we will take them at the end. So brilliant. Thank you so much. And for our last presenter for today's webinar. Vanessa was here. I wonder if she's still there. Vanessa, are you still with us?
I got back.
Ah, fantastic. Well done. I did see you pop out. I'm glad you're back. Vanessa is going to be talking about assessment literacy needs analysis with pre-service teachers. Really? That's what she's going to be talking about. So Vanessa, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, that's sort of provocative. It was in purpose. So thank you, Mina, for this invitation. I'm very excited. I can't see it coming like next week, next month, and I'm very excited about it and have the opportunity to start these conversations here. Is my screen showing to you?
We can see your first slide, yes. Your camera is off, but if that's intentional, that's fine.
Oh, yeah. But the idea with this talk is just to give you a taste of something that I'll be presenting in May. That is a needs analysis that we did with pre-service teachers here at the university I work. I come from the University of Brasilia. And let's just give you a glance of the things that we do here. What's the purpose in doing a needs analysis with undergraduate students? And someone may think, well, we do needs analysis with experts. We want to ask people about what's needed, what's important, and we are looking for people that have something to say. So why would we do that with undergraduate students who are in initial education? So let me just give you an idea of a reason why we did that, and that may be the case in other places where you work. So here, this is the University of Brasilia. This is the Letters Institute. The Letters Institute here has 3 departments, and we are responsible for language teacher education, mother tongue, and foreign and second language teachers as well. So here I just put a sequence of maybe a set of 5 different courses where second or foreign languages are taught. And these are especially for teacher education. So if you take a look, we have English, Spanish, French, Japanese, and Portuguese as a foreign language. And all these courses, of course, they are aligned to a federal legislation that tells us
Vanessa,
yeah?
sorry, can I stop you? I don't think your slides are moving forward if you're moving your slides.
Really?
Yeah, sorry.
Not yet?
No, it's still on the first slide. Sorry, I should have interrupted you, but I was waiting to see if it was me or...
No, I appreciate it. Let's try again. Yeah, it has happened with almost everybody today, right?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. Do you want to just try moving it on?
Second one?
Still can't see the second slide. No, it still says 1 of 8. Are you in slide share mode?
Yes, I am, and it's showing the second slide for me. Would you like to share your screen?
I can do it.
Help
Yeah,
me.
I can do it. So are we on the second slide now?
Yes, we are. Yeah, on the second one.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, it's moved on now. Oh, you've stopped sharing.
Yeah, so that you can start sharing your screen.
But actually in the chat, everybody's saying that they can move it on themselves. So I did not know that you could do that. I'm learned something there.
I mean, you can move on slides.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Well, technology.
No, I did not know that. So why don't you share and we will follow you? That might be the easiest thing.
Let's try again.
Apologies, participants. I really am not very good at technology. I did not know that that was possible. So I think you should start from slide 2 and we can move it on ourselves, Vanessa.
Are we there? So this is the second slide where you can
This
see
is the second slide, yeah.
And you can see the picture of the University of Brasilia, right? So
yes.
Mina, maybe you can give me some feedback here. Is how important it is for students and teachers and presenters. So as I was saying, at the University of Brasilia, we have foreign language teacher education in the department where I work. And what these courses have in common when we look at the curriculum that they follow is that by half of the course, mid-course, students have necessarily at least one course, one discipline in methodology, language teaching methodology. And also all of them move on to a teaching practice. Now, this happens more to these are 4-year courses. So this happens more to the 3rd to the 4th year, sometimes at the 2nd year. As you can see, there's only one of the degrees nowadays that has a component, a discipline totally dedicated to assessment and where we provide assessment literacy, and that is the English degree. That was possible only after a reform, and as you know, curriculum reform takes long time, lots of discussion. So the other degrees are also working on their own reforms for the courses. But the thing is, meantime, until that comes out, what are we going to do? Those students, I'm speaking about, let's say about 50 students per year in each of these different degrees, and they are having no assessment, no dedicated course to assessment. So our idea was put in some courses, some workshops or short courses at the extension school that would make available for all the students who don't have a dedicated course on assessment to take part and discuss and get more literate on that. So the needs analysis I'm talking about is a needs and interest analysis. I think nowadays we have some information, and the literature is already it's not that new. So we have a set of core ideas, concepts, content, skills that we know that are necessary for all teachers. The very question is that we have to make decisions in terms of what is more, let's say, urgent, maybe, what is more basic, and this is still under discussion. We were interested in knowing what our students feel that they need. What are they interested in studying when it comes to assessment? So that when we offered the courses, we would have students enrolled and really engaged. So when doing needs analysis, and I'm always referring to needs and interest analysis with undergraduate students, we're speaking about asking non-experts. And there are some challenges in doing that. And some drawbacks also. First thing is, why are you asking someone who's not an expert to tell you what they need? It's like, what? Come again? If I knew it, I wouldn't be here, right? At first place. So the idea is, what can they possibly say? Are we wasting time doing such a thing? The second challenge that we have is with terminology. If our students are not experts, are not specialists, and have very little knowledge, especially if they have not undergone a process of a teaching practice, a supervised teaching practice, they will very probably not be very familiar with the terminology that we use in assessment. So when we are designing our materials, our instruments to collect information from our students to understand what they are interested in, we have to be careful in the use of terminology that we make. This is one example for questions that you have. I moved to the other slide, right? It was part of an instrument that was used by Vox, Agari, and Spanudis as part of a mixed methods research that they conducted. This was done with in-service teachers. So asking open-ended questions, such as, for example, in number 4, what language testing and assessment training would you like in the short term? What do you need? How much do you know? What else is missing? Is really, you're going to be this is going to be very little informative for you, right? So we have to pay attention at our instruments, especially in the open-ended questions. because they have very little experience as teachers. Some of them do have some experience, but most don't. So thinking about instruments, I'm moving to the other one. Now you can see another instrument that was used by Folger. Okay. We could consider more guided instruments that could somehow provide students with more information so that they could make their decisions and select things that they understand what we are talking about. I am referring to the aspect here of the scale from 1 to 5. So this is the Likert scale. It can give us some more information in terms of how much I feel I know, how much I feel I need about those topics. Again, here, this is just as one example of an instrument that could or should or should not be used for our context with pre-service teachers. But another thing here is the terminology. So for example, probably for my students, if I use the word specifications, they would have no idea what I'm talking about. So again, we have to pay attention at the terminology that we bring. The thing with using Likert scales is that they're very good for attitudes, but for needs and interests, it's not that case. I think that people that have used this and asked students what they need, or even teachers, in-service teachers, what's important to be in a course, in assessment, all your answers are going to be in number 4 and number 5, if not 5 only, right? So Likert scales here, they don't discriminate very well so that we can make decisions only based on only an information that this sole instrument brings to us. And now I'm echoing what Frank Giraldo has just said. So we have to pay attention to different sources of information for us. Everything is so important. So how can we deal with that in that situation? So I'm going to give you an example of something that we did. We, when we were doing this, conducting this needs and interests analysis to put on the courses, to make the courses available for our students here, we analyzed several different instruments that had been used by other researchers. We were really paying attention at the terminology and changing the terminology to a non-specialized one. And by that, we were using examples whenever we felt that they would be clarifying the idea. So here, this was the command that we gave to our students. Here, imagine that you have the opportunity to take part in an introductory course on language assessment taught here at UNB. So we localized it here, and we told our students, hey, this is not just for research purposes. We are really putting something for you. What are you interested in? And choose the option that best represents your needs and your interests. So in number 1, for example, that was one of the items that we had, designing objective questions. Instead of designing test items, for example, we try to get linked to the terms that students use here. And I tried to translate this. Of course, this was done in Portuguese so that we could attend to different students in different foreign languages. But here I translated to English just for this presentation. So I tried to be the most literal and close to Portuguese. When they say designing objective questions, they say in Portuguese, perguntas objetivas, questões objetivas, but here we're referring to items, of course. And the use of examples, not just by translating it to a language they could understand, but also giving examples such as multiple choice, true and false, and so on. Number 9, scoring criteria for tasks, projects, or presentations instead of rubrics. Even the word rubrics, for very little experienced teachers, I don't think that is a term that belongs to their everyday lives. And in 38, what to say about this? Increasing consistency, decreasing subjectivity instead of increasing reliability. So this was one of the things that we were worried about, and we planned our instrument. Now, the second challenge that I mentioned when using this is how are we going to collect this? We thought that a 5-point Likert scale would be interesting instead of saying yes, this is important or that is not important. Let's try to grade the level of importance. Again, the problem was if we end up with fours and fives for everything, this is not very discriminate. So we could use the mean rank to organize and rank the ones that were considered the most important ones for our students. So I'm just giving you a taste of part of the results that we got. So here in the slides called, which is entitled Some Results, you're going to see on the top that we could organize and working with the mean rank, find the items or the topics or themes, whatever you want to call them, that were most important for our students, in our students' opinions. So, for example, adaptation and accommodation to disorders and disabilities, assessing in bilingual education. This is all about assessment, right? Assessment, assessing integrated skills, so designing instruments to assess integrated skills, how to assess speaking, and so. And at the bottom, yes.
Just a minute left. Sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah, this is the last slide actually. At the bottom, we can see that they are not very interested in speaking or learning, studying about objective questions, paper and pencil tests, very traditional tests. So we could see, for example, that in the first one, and the one that is on the top, accommodations and adaptations to students with disorders or disabilities, 86% of our respondents thought that they were oh my goodness, the light green is the important need and the dark green is extreme need. So 86% of them thought that this would be very important or of extreme need. While, for example, in the paper and pencil test, we have to learn how to design good traditional tests. 26% of them thought that this is not very important. I just want to refer back to what Frank said. That is, we don't think, but that talking about paper and pencil tests is not important. The thing is, how are we going to advertise the courses that we do? And starting from the topics they are most interested in, how can we get to the ones that are still needed, that we know they're still needed, and move from the things that they want to discuss to the things that we know that they need. Well, the results of this, after we have collected it, we started by designing workshops. We offered last year 3 different workshops. The first one on neurodiversity in language teaching. It was about autism spectrum disorder. It was not specifically about assessment. It was about what that is, so that we could organize it in the second module and put how then we should assess students, language students that have ASD. Another one on assessing oral skills, specifically in designing speaking tasks, and the last one on assessing integrated skills. They are all very related to the ones that we got as results of, hey, we really want to be part of this. And we got many students actually enrolled and engaged. I guess around 20 to 25 students in each workshop that we gave. And we plan to give many more and organize it on a regular basis. That's it.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your work with us. It sounds fascinating. I have a couple of questions. That was great. I have a couple of questions, but I am going to open the floor to our participants for questions as well. But while we wait for more questions to come in, I'm going to start off with a question for Frank from John. And he says, hello, Frank. Is there a good criterion so as to measure test validity?
the $1 million question, the $1 million question. Okay. So, let's suppose I'm going to design a reading test that I want to use with my students in the classroom. So this reminds me of something that James Popham wrote in a book. I don't remember exactly what the reference is. You shouldn't start by churning out items. You shouldn't just sit in front of a computer and start designing items. The way we plan our lessons, that's what we should also do with our assessments. We should plan our assessments, and that's what we call test specifications. So we should write some sort of specifications before we create the assessment instrument, so that we can have some quality control on what exactly we want to assess. So if I'm going to design a reading test, what about reading do I want to assess? And is this reading skill, particular, very specific reading skill that I want to assess in the test, part of my curriculum? Or is it going to be a learning outcome, just to echo what Dr. Westbrook was talking about? So planning your assessment, in this case, your reading test, should be a stage to start working towards making the test valid, and their interpretations that come out of this, the data that the test produces. But the question that you're asking, John, is a question that can be answered in many, many ways. So I just gave you one example of how it could be approached for the classroom context. But there are many, many other ways in which it can be answered. I could come up with a Master of Arts program to answer that question, actually. So I hope I answered that to some extent. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for the question, John. I don't know if Carolyn or Vanessa want to come in on that one. No.
Yeah, I was just going to say, basically, I agree with Frank. Obviously, the criterion is basically your construct, so what it is you want to assess. So basically, whatever your learning outcome is, whatever whatever the skills and abilities are that you want to assess, if you look at your test and ask yourself, am I assessing those things? That will help you to measure test validity. So I always give the example of a reading test at an institution I used to work at, where there was a reading test, there were a few comprehension questions, and then there were about 6 or 7 vocabulary questions. And it was basically matching the word that appeared in the text to the definition. But the thing was, you didn't actually need to read the text to be able to answer those questions. So that whole task was just a vocabulary exercise. You could read the text if you wanted to, but you didn't need to. But the test was called a reading test, and that wasn't assessing my reading in any way, shape or form. That was assessing my knowledge of vocabulary. So it's always asking yourself, what is it I'm testing, or what is it that I want to test, and do these items or do these tasks measure that skill or ability?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So we have a question from Sir Franklin, who says, and I think this is an open question to anybody, do you have strategies on assessment ESP based on STEM profile, STEM? So for those people who don't know, I've asked Franklin to spell it out, but does anybody want to begin to answer that? Do you have strategies on assessment, Carolyn?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that I understand the question, but I think if it's based on STEM, again, it comes down to what do the students need to be able to do with the language. So, for example, if you're teaching science majors, they might need to write lab reports, for example. So you need to be able to teach them the language, the genre, and the content of lab reports. If they are mathematicians, for example, you might need to teach them the language of mathematical formulas. I'm not sure if that's answered your question. Maybe you can just give me a nod in the chat.
If that has answered your question, pop it in the chat. Thank you, Carolyn. I don't know if Frank or Vanessa want to add to that before we go on to the next question.
I guess it's something that applies to all situations, not specifically about STEM, is consider the realities where people have to use language. So again, going with the idea of a needs analysis, a job analysis, and considering, as Caroline has just said, the genre and the purposes why people use language in those situations, and then trying to recreate those activities. and in classes. And that's the same for the teaching activities and for assessment activities, as they are all linked. They have to be really the same. So this is something I was talking to my students right now. They are preparing a class. They are preparing actually to start teaching their supervised practice. That is, let's consider what we're doing, who we are in the situations that we recreate, the purposes and the genres, the artifacts that we use to produce language and interact in society. So by getting a very good picture of what real people in this area, whatever they are in the area, do with language and recreating them, bringing in a more authentic, in an authentic fashion to class, I think is a good way to go, a good way to start.
Thank you, Vanessa and Carolyn. Thank you for that question, Sir Franklin. Okay, so Dave has put a question in about LAL directly. Has anybody done a meta study of the content of LAL courses worldwide so as to support the best possible design for training and CPD in whatever national or institutional context? Really good question, Dave. Thank you. Do we know of any such study?
I think, if I may, I included a link to an article, rather recent article, in which I think Dave could find some insights on the design of assessment courses. But this is something I said in my short talk. I think we need to have some sort of compilation of experiences of people teaching assessment courses in as many different contexts as possible, because we need to contribute to what I was telling you about, a pedagogy of LAL. And I don't, so far, I mean, as far as my knowledge goes, I haven't seen a meta study on assessment courses.
Okay, I actually don't think I have either.
No, the only thing that came to mind is Kreml and Harding's 2019 study, but that was for a language assessment literacy survey. That's the word I'm trying to say. But I'm not aware of the content of courses. Anything on that?
No, I don't know. No, John, Dave, I don't think there is one actually.
But
sounds like an interesting idea. Sorry,
you can also look at Brown and Bailey 2007, and they had another follow-up study in 2011, and that was about the content of language testing courses. Brown and Bailey, and those two are in the language testing journal. A little dated, but they have very interesting information about contents in language assessment courses.
So a research gap. Sorry,
there
Vanessa.
are some other articles. I remember one by Davis, also in 2008, but actually was not about courses. It was about more about textbooks, contents in textbooks. But the textbooks, as we know, they guide many of courses that we teach in language courses, and the same may happen also for assessment courses as well. Yeah, this is
Thank you.
what occurs to me. One of the things that I guess Frank says in one of his articles is that this is a gap that we have, but it's very difficult comparing the courses, because the articles that come out do not describe that in many details. So it's very difficult to put all together and have a very comprehensive picture of how they are or how they could or should be.
Thank you. I'd like to squeeze one last question in. We were running out of time, but this is quite a specialised question, but I think it's a good question, and a question that many teachers have all over the world. What could you recommend for the adaptations required for students with special needs when developing assessment strategies? It's a tough one.
Well, I guess first thing, there are accommodations and there are adaptations that we have to do. Adaptations are more referred to the instruments that we bring and to the content. I mean, what is the thing that you're assessing really? What are the competences that you expect your students to achieve? So I guess it all starts with the objectives for those particular students. For that, you have to understand what the disorder is. You have to understand the picture of the situation. And there are other things that then of course, your instrument may be a very different instrument than other students may use. In some situations, instruments don't need to be adapted. It's just a matter of accommodating students, for example, by providing them with some more time to do the tests or the assessment, alternative assessments or so. So first of all would be we have to know what the disorder is like, the consequences of it for the student, and understanding, okay, what is the student able to do? What are the goals for this particular student? And then designing it as we do for any other tests as well.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you so much. I think Frank has his hand up. Frank, you want to come in?
Thank you. Of course, we are responsible for considering our students' special educational needs, but the question I always put out there for teachers to discuss and for us to problematize is, what is our support system? In what ways is your government in your country supporting these students? In what ways is your municipal or regional government supporting these students? In what ways is your institution, your school, supporting these students? So what is the support system and what is the infrastructure that we have in place or that we don't have in place for supporting these students? So it should be, it's part of a system, because I'm not an expert in special educational needs. I'm a language teacher, let's say. I could read about it, but I need to be part of a whole team of people who support these kinds of students.
Thank you. So I think it's not just the teacher's responsibility, but it's part of a bigger school or institution approach. I think that was it. And I can't believe it, but we only have 1 minute left. That's been an hour and it's gone zip by. I would like to say thank you very much to our three wonderful presenters, Carolyn, Frank and Vanessa. They've just given you a little taster of what to expect at New Directions. So you can carry on the conversation with them there. Before we go, I would like to just share that discount slide with you once more, because, oh, not that one, because I think I've lost it. No, I've lost it. Sorry. I've lost it completely, because I think that people want the discount code once more, just in case, but I can't seem to find it. There it is. So if you do want to register for New Directions and you want to take advantage of the discount, 70% for the night owl discount, the code is there, night70, and 50% for if you register up until Friday midnight, and it's 50% there. So that discount code is web50. Please share that with colleagues and friends. If you would like this slide, I can share that with you. But apart from that, thank you to all the participants for your time and for being with us for one or both of the webinars. The recording will be up on the website, just like the last one. Any questions, please write to New Directions LATAM, and we look forward to seeing you in May. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care. Have a good evening, morning, afternoon. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. See you in Brazil.
Bye.
Take care.